Welcome back to the Chad Easty Show. Final hour of your Monday. Well, my Monday. Your Monday continues because we got Rush coming up right after. Much to get into in this hour of the program, including a little Beto O'Rourke news. He thinks that you're ready and willing to give up that AR-15. He thinks you're ready. At least if you're a guy at a urinal at Buc-ee's, you're ready to give up that AR-15. We'll talk about that. Also, we'll get into some of the other national stuff that's been going on. Joining us on the phones right now to talk a little Texas politics, Texas news. And it was a busy weekend. It's our good friend Scott Braddock, Editor Quorum Report, here on the Chad Easty Show. Scott, it was not a slow weekend for you.
No rest for the weary around here. That's okay. The ragweed hit me real hard the middle of last week, so of course I felt 100% to cover news all weekend.
You were excited about it.
I'm just now getting my voice back just in time for radio, but it was a weekend of a vice chair race at the House GOP caucus. We can talk about that. It was a big fight at the State Republican Executive Committee. All of it with the Speaker's scandal as the undertone, simmering in the background. You've got the Speaker's team, what I would guess, furiously lobbying folks who are in both the caucus and on the State Republican Executive Committee, basically trying to circle the wagons for him and rack up victories here, because he needs to reestablish that he has the confidence of Republicans. And I would say, on balance, a good weekend for him, but I'm not sure what it is foreshadowing here, because the way in which some of this went down, and we can get into the details, the way it went down maybe causes some more hard feelings at a time when the Speaker doesn't need that.
Yeah, you kind of break down what happened this weekend, because, Scott, I mean, I was kind of tweeting you about this and probably texting you about this as well. Let's be honest. The average person over the weekend, they were not paying attention to anything what you're about to talk about. They were paying attention to football what their kids were doing this weekend. I guess first break down what happened this weekend, and then two, why it matters.
I would much rather have been watching Texas Tech or anything else.
I don't know about that.
Well, more fun than this. So with the vice chair race, and this is all precipitated by the fact that Dustin Burrows, of course, resigned as chairman of the Texas House Republican Caucus in the wake of this scandal, which we have talked about for, Chad, for months now.
Yeah.
The idea that Burrows, Bonnen, and Michael Quinn Sullivan with Empower Texans, who's still welcome on the show, as I understand it. What day are we on?
I got to go back. I think we're day 25. Yeah, day 25 today.
I was doing the math real quick.
Hang on, Scott. Hang on.
Yeah, take a look there.
Jody, have we gotten a call from
Jody,
Michael
no.
Quinn Sullivan?
I forgot to tally that up, but I believe it's 25.
Okay, 20. So you have not heard from Michael Quinn Sullivan yet?
No, not unless, no.
Okay, all right. So we're at day 25, Scott.
All right, day 25. He has not come on the show to explain his side of this. Burrows did come on the show, of course, and explained the situation as he sees it. But Burrows, lost the trust of the members, and that's why he had to step down as House Republican Caucus chairman. He still is the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee going forward, at least as long as Dennis Bonnen is still the Speaker. I mean, that's what we believe. And who knows if he's going to stay the Speaker. That's what this is all about. But the vice chair race became front and center for House Republicans as sort of a test vote on confidence in the Speaker, because Speaker Bonnen indicated that he had a favorite in the race. It's a guy named Jim Murphy, who's from Houston, and he was running against Andrew Murr, who is from Kerr County. He's from Kerrville area, the Hill Country. And while Murphy had been one of the only people to listen to the audio recording of the meeting between Sullivan, Bonnen, and Burrows, and Murphy, one of the only ones that I can think of to come out of the meeting or come out of hearing the recording and say, look, the Speaker is right about this. He kept telling Michael Quinn Sullivan over and over again to not go after Republicans. Of course, the allegation is, just to catch people up real quick, the allegation is that the Speaker had asked Sullivan to target 10 House Republicans in their primaries next March, and Bonnen denies that. Murphy took the Speaker's side, and he became the Speaker's candidate. Well, he won the race, but there were some allegations of, as Trump would say, that it was rigged,
right?
Or as Bernie would say, it's all rigged. There were questions about whether the ballot process was actually secret, what they had was electronic voting for all of the Republican members of the House. They could log into a website and cast their vote for vice chair. And the caucus chair, Stephanie Click, who's from Fort Worth, went to the extent on Saturday, again during football, to explain that no, we couldn't see how anybody was voting. We didn't ask anybody to change their votes. We posted her email at quorumreport.com. She had said to all of the members of the caucus that they used a system that's totally secure. It's called e-ballot, and that people that the members would be able to register their votes, and then those votes could not be changed. I mean, this is how bad, and it's a lot of detail, Chad, but this is how bad it's gotten as far as distrust for the leadership in the House. There were Republican members calling us at Quorum Report over the weekend and talking amongst themselves over the weekend, which is more important than them talking to us, but talking amongst themselves about whether the thing was rigged, whether or not House leadership could actually see how they were voting rather than it being a secret ballot. And then I had some text messages late Friday after the announcement was made of who the winner was, that the Speaker's candidate had won. And these text messages from members and staffers saying that members had been called by leadership to change their votes, or to if they hadn't voted yet, to vote for Murphy. Now it's not unusual that the leadership would sort of whip the members, try to get them to vote their way, but that's just how bad it is. They were promised that this is a secret ballot, and there are Republican members who just don't believe that it actually was a secret ballot, and that's why the caucus chair had to put out that email.
Scott, the Michael Quinn Sullivan of Empower Texans, who, I mean, this, the domino started falling once he made this, big pronouncement on Twitter and on his website. He says that Murphy is corrupt. Do you know why he says that?
He says that he's corrupt because Murphy helps to run a special purpose district in the Houston area, and it's one of these sort of economic development things. They have these special purpose districts all over the state, and when Murphy was a chairman of a committee and he's still a chairman, but he was a chairman of a different committee when Speaker Strauss was in office. He was actually the chairman of the special purpose districts committee. And so he was overseeing, the way that those are run at the state level. And he also, Murphy gets bonuses. It's been reported in Houston that he gets bonuses for bringing in tax dollars from the state. The allegation is that Murphy has lobbied the state to get tax dollars for his special purpose district that he runs back in Houston. That's what he's talking about. What Murphy would say is that he works basically as a 1099 consultant for that special purpose district, and there's nothing wrong with it, and he's gone over the legalities and everything looks fine. But some other people have consistently said that the way he does his business is quote-unquote shady. Not that I agree with that, but that is what Sullivan's talking about.
Okay. Also, over the weekend, you had a vote basically about Speaker Bonnen.
Yeah, at the State Republican Executive Committee, they were potentially going to ask the House Republican Caucus to endorse a new Republican representative for Speaker. You remember last year, it was Dustin Burrows over the course of the last year to 24 months, that he was the one to push for this process by which the Republican caucus would endorse somebody for Speaker, which had not been the case before, and it's still the case that legally the Texas House elects the Speaker, as a whole. The Democrats and the Republicans all together elect the Speaker. That's still the case, but the caucus does have a process for selecting someone that they prefer for Speaker. The State Republican Party debated, and it was emotional, Chad. Again, while you were watching football, I was sitting there listening to people almost scream at each other about this. At the State Republican Executive Committee, they were debating whether or not to call on the caucus to pick somebody else for Speaker, or at least consider doing that. And it was a very close vote in the final analysis. On the key vote, it was 31 to 29 against calling on the Texas House GOP to endorse a new Republican Speaker candidate. And there are those who are on the SREC, which is the governing body for the state Republican Party, there are those who said, look, trust has been lost here, and we need to differentiate ourselves from the Democrats, and we need to not put up with corruption or even what's perceived as corruption. And there were those who said, look, we should wait for the Texas Rangers investigation. You do have law enforcement looking into this, whether or not anything illegal happened, whether or not there was an illegal quid pro quo when the Speaker is alleged to have promised media credentials to Sullivan and his group in exchange for the way they would spend their political money in the next Republican primary. And that argument seemed to win the day. And I would also say, to a point that you've made, Chad, in the absence of the audio, so the audio has not been released publicly of this meeting. Of course, there are some people who have heard the tape, and as we mentioned, Representative Murphy and others have heard that tape. It's probably 40 or 50 people who have heard it by now. I was told that 20 members of the State Republican Executive Committee had heard the audio, and I would guess that those 20 were among those who voted to ask the Speaker to sort of step aside and then consider somebody new. But in the absence of the audio, I think this cuts in the direction of those who say there should be due process and they shouldn't jump to conclusions about this. And you might imagine, Chad, that if the audio had come out prior to this meeting, that the state Republican Party over the weekend might have taken the stance that there needs to be a new Republican Speaker. But, of course, Empower Texans continues to refuse to release that audio. And I talked to some members of the House over the weekend who didn't want to be on the record, but I'll say it this way. Some who have not been sympathetic to Speaker Bonnen at all in this situation, who said that it seems that Empower Texans has potentially overplayed their hand at this point. That they took a pass on sort of influencing the vice chair race, which was seen as a referendum by some on the Speaker, and they took a pass on really influencing the State Republican Executive Committee at this particular meeting. They'll have another meeting in December where I guess someone could offer a similar sort of resolution. But without the audio, it just didn't happen. You could imagine that the vote might have cut the other way. It was so close, and whenever there's a close vote like that, you can't discount any piece of evidence. And when folks say that maybe Empower has overplayed their hand, it could be right, because as we've talked about here on the show, that audio has been hyped and hyped and hyped and hyped for months. And how often have we seen it where something is hyped up so much and then the actual thing just doesn't live up to the billing? At this point, the Speaker would have had to have been saying really, really horrendous things on that tape for it to be as bad as they've made it out to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that fair? I mean,
I think so. I think so. Oh, by the way, has anyone accused that vote of being rigged, since everything else is being rigged when it goes the way Bonnen wants it to go? Or in a favorable light towards Bonnen, it's rigged. Has anyone claimed that that vote over the weekend was rigged?
There was no claim like that, but I did talk to some members of the SREC after the vote who said that they felt that it was not the right outcome. They felt like, you do have actual grassroots who are upset about this, and that they need to be, and this is interesting because both sides of this debate seem to say this, that the party needs to be focused on 2020. Yeah. One of the SREC members I talked to said, the Republican grassroots needs to be fired up, to win next year, and it's hard for them to be fired up when the party doesn't take a firm stance on this. That was one person's reaction. And then from the other side, they were arguing that the way to unite the party is to not take a stance on this, to not speak out against the Republican Speaker. As you and I have talked about, a few times here on the show, it's not an appearance of unity when you have potentially the Speaker of the House being called out by his own party, when you have potentially a primary challenge shaping up for Senator John Cornyn, and you have Dan Patrick feuding openly with the National Rifle Association. That unity thing's not going so well so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we let you go, Scott, I want you to get into some information that came out over the weekend about how many people could vote in 2020 in Texas.
Fascinating. One other reason that I was actually glad I was at the State Republican Executive Committee meeting this weekend was that the former chairman, Steve Munisteri, I believe he's two chairmen ago, he is now consulting for, among other things, the John Cornyn campaign. He gave a presentation to the SREC in which he talked about the idea that we might have as many as 11 million people vote in Texas. We're looking at record numbers here. As you know, it was 8.4 million who voted in the off-year election in 2018, and of course that meant that Democrats, or at least it was part of why Democrats seemed to do better. Munisteri said, look, that means if you've got 11 million potentially voting, whichever party makes it to 5.5 million votes first is the winner, and Republicans have still outpaced Democrats for how many voters there are in Texas who are voting for their respective parties, but the Democrats are catching up quickly, and this is why Munisteri and others have been pushing this idea that Republicans need to spend a whole lot of money to find new Republican voters. And as you know, Chad, they've raised at least about $10 million so far with that goal in mind. They've got this group called Engage Texas where they're going around trying to sign up folks who would seem to lean toward voting for Republicans. They're looking to spend a ton of money to try to get new Republicans on the voter rolls. And in all the time I've been covering Texas politics, that's never been the case. It's always been Democrats who are desperately trying to find new voters. And as Paul Burka, who used to write for Texas Monthly, as he used to say, he was sort of the dean of the press corps before he retired, he had said that when you talk about a candidate who's trying to find new voters, there's a word for that. It's loser. And right now it's the Republicans who are trying to find new voters.
Scott, tell folks what they can find at Quorum Report.
Well, we've got announcements about candidates running for the Texas House and Senate. It's that time of year. We'll see, I think we may see some more retirements ahead. We've got a new candidate running for a state Senate seat and other things that we'll be tracking for you at quorumreport.com. We always send you the breaking news on what's happening with your state government if you sign up for the free emails there at quorumreport.com.
All right. As always, Scott, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chad.
That's Scott Braddock, editor of Quorum Report.